want to bring in Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, your reaction to what you witnessed yesterday in the East Room?
Yeah, good morning, Cheryl. It's very exciting. I mean, President Trump is a clear, decisive leader. He's laid out a very clear end state. He wants to restore peace in Ukraine, and he's been a great facilitator for peace, both in his first term and in his current term. So I think he left pretty encouraged, and I think a lot of people around the world are very hopeful that you can finally see some sort of peaceful resolution to this war.
What do you make of this, as Politico calls it, the coalition of the willing? And this would be a working group set up and led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio that would, further the conversations to get to a bilateral between, say, it's Putin and Zelensky, or a trilateral meeting.
Yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of the real core work comes down, working out the details. The details always matter, and you find sticking points. And once that's refined, hopefully they can come together and consummate the deal. But there are clearly differences. I mean, obviously, the war could have been avoided. President Putin said that to President Trump. He said, hey, if President Trump was here, this war wouldn't have happened. I think a lot of people around the world agree with that sentiment, that President Trump would have taken action to prevent the war. But now President Trump is really doing the facilitation to get it resolved. That doesn't take anything away from the professionals like Secretary Rubio and others who are going to continue the kind of dialogue to work out the details and find a way that works for everyone.
Do you think that the sanctions have been effective against Russia? They're still exporting oil and natural gas. China and India are still buying, and Western Europe still buying energy products from Russia.
Yeah, I mean, this really highlighted how bad Biden's energy policy was. When this war first started, energy prices spiked, and Biden responded by weakening U.S. energy policy. And so he was left with no choice but to provide a massive outlet for Venezuelan oil, for India and China to buy Russian energy, and really take no action except to facilitate it. So here you see what really, the timing of it anyway, when President Trump started putting sanctions or threatening very extensive sanctions against India, which is the second largest export market for Russian energy, Putin came to the table. So I think energy is a very key play here. And also for the future of energy, who is going to supply the demands for Europe. And I think, Russia wants to stay engaged with the world instead of isolated.
So that's the motivator that got Putin to the table. That's interesting you say that, between the threat of maybe more sanctions and also the pressure on India that we've put on them to stop buying the oil from Russia. I want to get to some domestic issues with you. House Speaker Mike Johnson slamming California Governor Newsom's proposed House map, says he's going to do what he can to stop the new congressional lines from advancing. He wrote, Democrats across the nation have played politics with redistricting for decades. This is just the latest example. Republicans who are following state and federal laws will not be lectured by people who abuse the system. There's also this. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. He says Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem would be among the first called in to testify on Capitol Hill over immigration policy if the Democrats take the take the House in the next election cycle, in the midterms. Congressman, what's your reaction to those comments from him?
Well, here's where those two segments come together, right? You can't have an honest election if you don't have an honest census. And right now, one of the most important things President Trump is doing is directing Commerce to redo the census. They counted illegals. California's got lots of illegals. People estimate they've got 6 or 7 extra representatives in the House, in the U.S. House, because they're counting non-citizens in their population. If you're not a citizen of the United States, you have embassies and consulates. Congress is designed to represent the citizens of this country. But when you look at the fight, they didn't accidentally flood the country with all these illegals coming across the border. They did it to get power. That was one of the objectives of why they wanted to flood in, not just anywhere in the state, sanctuary cities. So they're flooding the cities where everyone with common sense gets out of because of the crime and poor management in the cities. When you have an opportunity to leave, a lot of people do. They might stay nearby, but they get out of the danger zones, and then they repopulate that with the illegals. So states like California are gaming this system, and it is a fight for just protecting people here in Ohio. For example, what's going on in California stole a seat from our congressional delegation. Instead of 16 representatives, we now have 15. So it has an impact all over the country.
That's interesting that you say that. Before you go, I do want to ask you about some of the more news that's being made right now. So the House Republican Conference is demanding the inclusion of community project funding to avoid a potential government shutdown. The return of earmarks to the annual appropriations bill is sparking a party battle between Republicans. Some say that earmarks are a return to the days of pork barrel spending. Congressman, do you think that this threatens the passage of funding bills before that September 30th deadline? Are we talking about a shutdown? And, you know, this concern was echoed. We brought this up yesterday. Alicia Finley said this is the risk of any kind of reconciliation 2.0. And this is to you. New goodies would be in here: industrial policy, protecting home state interests. The risk is that fiscal conservatives tee up a vehicle that's a grab bag of new spending and bad policy, no deficit reduction. Now that argument is happening within the Republican Party. Your reaction to that?
Well, let's be clear. Fiscal conservatives aren't driving this surge in spending. Fiscal conservatives are trying to stop it. But look, the first, quote, earmark, they've kind of, I don't know, Orwellian names. I mean, you know, community funded projects. I mean, if it was community funded, it wouldn't be in federal appropriations, right? So it's an earmark. But the first earmark, I think, was in 1790. I mean, right away, they decided they were going to fund a lighthouse and they were going to put more money into Portland. Portland, Maine. So they were looking at how to direct federal spending pretty early on. It obviously got pretty far out of control. And when Speaker Boehner, my predecessor in the U.S. House, was Speaker, Republicans banned earmarks. And the Senate still hasn't unbanned them, but the House did when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker the second time, kind of restored earmarks. And that is a key way for people to get votes. I think it's a big sticking point in the appropriations process. But right now, neither Leader Thune nor Speaker Johnson have laid out a clear plan for what we're going to do ahead of September 30th. And I think that's the real fight. We're going to need votes for a CR, and they're either going to come from, the bulk of the party agreeing with conservatives and saying we're going to do reconciliation and do some conservative things that we promised, or they're going to find a way to do a CR that cuts a deal with Democrats and does a big spending omnibus bill.
There's a lot at stake.
There's going to have to be a decision quick.
A lot at stake. Congressman Warren Davidson. Thank you, Congressman. We'll be right back, everybody.
Thank you.